I'm going to finish this episode by looking at Father's Day. Father's Day was, of course, last weekend, but nonetheless I want to say a few things about it. I do believe, and I speak from experience, I'm one of the lucky ones, one of the blessed ones, I'm acutely aware of that, but I do earnestly believe, and I've thought hard about this, that apart from salvation itself, there is no single greater blessing that a man can have than a godly father. I say that because demographers, I say I'm lucky, because demographers are confirming that fatherlessness is one of the fastest growing trends in society. It has been for some time. It's in fact a cultural crisis. 81.8% of single parent families in Australia right now are headed by women. It's a huge disproportionality of fatherlessness. Children of single parent homes are more likely themselves to become single parents or to divorce. In fact, they're also more likely to live in poverty. That's Australian data. From the UK, we see that children from broken homes are 9 times more likely to commit violent crimes. 7 in 10 criminals in the UK come from broken homes. In the USA, we see that fatherlessness, specifically from studies done there, accounts for 63% of youth suicides, are young people without fathers. 90% of homeless and runaway youths are fatherless. 85% of children that exhibit behavioural disorders are fatherless. 71% of high school dropouts are fatherless. 70% of juveniles in state-operated institutions. 75% of adolescent patients in substance abuse centres. 75% of rapists motivated by displaced anger. A US study on fatherless girls found that they are 53% more likely to marry as teenagers. They are 111% more likely to have children as teenagers. They are 164% more likely to have a premarital birth. They are 90% more likely to dissolve their own marriages. These studies are very real. One quote from the study says, "Father-deprived girls show precocious sexual interest, derogation of masculinity and males, and poor ability to maintain sexual and emotional adjustment with one male." A higher level of self-control in school children with involved fathers was also associated with many other healthy qualities, such as improved general life skills, self-esteem, and higher social skills. These are quotes from the studies. And you see from those overwhelming statistics and the studies that have been done that fatherlessness is indeed a great tragedy, and it's an increasing tragedy. It's getting to the stage where a young person is singularly fortunate to have a father, let alone a godly father. But I wonder actually whether we, including Christian people, have been affected in our own thinking by our fatherless culture in a way that's maybe a little more subtle than we realise. I've actually known quite a number of women who aspire to be mothers. I recently heard one say that there is no higher calling. And that's very likely true. And we're acutely aware of the loss of that attitude from society and the loss of the value of motherhood. But I think we've forgotten the same in relation to fatherhood. Because most men ought to aspire to fatherhood and actually aspire to it beyond other things that men normally aspire to, like career and success and all these sorts of things, or even marriage, but not so much fatherhood. And I'm not sure that I've ever heard many men, any men, disclose a desire such as that. And yet this is surely one of the most urgent needs of our day. Just as motherhood is a high calling, fatherhood, God is described as a father. It is a tremendously high calling, and it's God's order for most men in the natural course of things. It's one of the most urgent needs of our day. The sons and daughters of this entire generation, as we've just seen, whether they know it or not, are crying out for their fathers, and the social impact of fatherlessness is awful. And we look to what is the call of Christ on a godly man. Well, he calls that man to give up his life for those that he has commanded to love. It's a powerful call. And for most, that begins with his family. And that's a principle articulated, for example, in Ephesians 5, where Paul says, "Husbands, love your wives as Christ loved the church and gave himself up for her, that he might sanctify her, having cleansed her by the washing of water and the word, so that he might present the church to himself in splendour, without spot or wrinkle or any such thing, that she might be holy and without blemish. And a man is called to love his family and love his family to be holy, because that's what's in their highest and best interest, and that's what Christ desires for them. He desires for them that righteousness without which no one shall see the Lord, to desire their purity, their perfection, their holiness, and he is to lay down his life in the service of that cause for his family. This is a primary, a basic calling for most men. You say, well, to what end? Well, observe, therefore, particularly in that context, it makes perfect sense, how many titans of the faith in Scripture have the influence of their God-fearing parents specifically singled out. You look to Moses, you look to Samuel, you look to David, you look to Timothy, you look to Jesus with Joseph and Mary. Tremendous parents of godly integrity. And you think the notion of patriarchs itself in the Old Testament shows this godly fatherhood that is so often seen, and the tremendous impact that it has, because parenting is a ministry of enormous importance. It's a ministry that directly impacts our eternal legacy for Christ in this way. And I think we've forgotten the call to be fathers, because we live in a fatherless generation that therefore cares little for fatherhood and for motherhood, and in fact denigrates both of them in many respects. But the way of the Lord is different. And the way of the Lord is good. I'm Mark Niles, and that was The Truth of It.